Sarah.
Hi, Shalida.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Just coming back
Oh,
from holidays, so yeah.
how was it?
It was great. You didn't
Cool.
you didn't leave yet?
Not yet. I'm waiting for next week. Yeah, looking forward for my vacation. So
Better late than never.
exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Hi everyone. Thank you for joining the second episode of our series on policy engine. We will start introducing ourselves quickly before we start, and then we will introduce our guest and he will present himself. So, I'm Charles-Edouard. I've been a software engineer for a bit more than 20 years now. And we decided with Sarah to start an individual project to start a series of live stream dedicated to the policy management tools. So yeah, Sarah.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Sarah. I'm the co-host of this show with Charles. We are, as he explained, we start this project because we are interested in policy management and we would like to share with you and learn with the community more about this topic. So I'm also a platform engineer, software engineer. I've been working with Charles a few years ago on different topics, and yeah, we are friends since then. So yeah, back to you, Charles.
Yes, thank you. So last in the last episode, we had the chance to invite Flavio Castelli from Kubernetes, and today we will have Frank Jogeleit. I'm not sure I pronounce his name well, but he will for sure correct me. Who is the author of the Policy Reporter? We will try to follow the same outline for this episode, but it's a bit different because the tool we present today is not a policy engine, but more a policy reporter tool that can make something out of policies and things like this. So it will be a bit different, but we will try to stick to the same format. We will start by learning more about Frank. We will then discover the project, then we will deep dive in the project to get more details on how the project works, how it evolved over time, what are the main use cases for his tool. Then we will enjoy a practical demo from Frank when, well, he will present how the tool works and what we can do with it. And finally, we will give the audience a chance to ask questions directly to Frank. So if you have questions, you can post them in the chat, and then we will go through the questions at the end of the show. Eventually, if some questions make sense, we will use those questions to answer um, during the show. But if it's not selected during the show, they will be addressed at the end.
Mhm.
So yes, Sarah, do you want to add something, or do you
Yeah,
want to introduce Frank?
yeah, sure. Just one quick thing to say here. We also write articles about different topics, including policy management related topics. So please visit our website and share, comment, give us your feedback about these articles. And yeah, we would be happy to hear from you on this. Yeah, now we can present our guest, Frank.
Oops. Hello, Frank.
Hi,
Hey
Frank.
everyone, thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for joining. How are you?
Fine so far.
Cool.
Good, great. Can you give us like a quick introduction of Frank, your background, what you are interested in, and how did you end up working on policy management related topics?
Yeah, sure. So I started for a bit more than 10 years with software development, mostly in agency business background, where we developed some individual solutions for different companies based on PHP and some JavaScript front-end technologies. The move to the cloud came with my last job at Levu. It's a German-based dating platform with which migrated shortly before I joined to Kubernetes and used more modern technology like Go. So I started with the journey to get into this technology stack, get into the Kubernetes community. And during the Corona times, I used the more free time to really deep dive into Kubernetes, join some communities, and get involved with tools like Falco and Calverno. And so this was my basically first step into this area. Besides my programming or besides the tools I'm developing, I'm doing some white training. I'm do rowing in the club near my city. I have some animals. I have a dog. So this used most of my time.
Okay, so you're basically what we call a back-end engineer.
Mostly, yeah.
Yeah. And what got you in what made you start working in the policy management field?
When
COVID?
I started with Kubernetes during COVID, I joined the Discord community from a member of Ranger these days, and he tried to train latest Kubernetes features and get the community involved with different tools. And one of these tools was Calverno in one of its early versions. And I created a challenge out of it to write my first article, so blog article. And I decided to write it about Falco these days. And so I got firstly involved with the security topic.
Okay. Yeah. Did you work remotely at that time, or were you just learning Kubernetes tools?
So with the beginning of the Corona time, I mostly worked remotely, and the Kubernetes community tooling was mostly my hobby. In my daily business, I just developed applications. We deployed to Kubernetes. I used it, but I was never kind of an Kubernetes engineer or an platform engineer or something like that. It was just the tool to deploy our applications, and we had a dedicated team for it. But I always was interested in the in kind of a full stack development. So I learned front end stacks, back end stacks, and also basic infrastructure topics. And so Kubernetes was one of my steps.
Okay.
Very interesting, because I think that we all, the three of us, are backend engineers or developers, and we end up somehow all of us working on this different topics like policy management, engineering, platform engineering topics, DevOps, etc. So yeah, it's interesting to see this transition. What is the story of every person, and how this transition, how they made this transition between the backend development to the infrastructure and the cloud related topics, like cloud native related topics.
Yeah. Myself, I better not do any front-end development.
It's also not my favorite work, but it's nobody's favorite work, I think, in the back end world. And so somehow has to do it. And then I decided to try it.
You're very tedious. Okay, and well, today you're going to present Policy Reporter, a tool you created yourself from scratch. And in the end, what made you create this tool? Why did you create it in the first place?
So, as I said, I wrote this article about Falco. And Falco has a side project called Falco Sidekick from Thomas, also from France. And this was basically a way to notify based on Falco alerts. So Falco is basically does just reporting. It does not prevent something. And you need some way to interact with these notifications or these alerts, get them visible in your tooling, or create actions out of it. And Falco Sidekick does this for you. It forwards your alerts to Slack, Alert Manager. It creates metrics and so on.
Okay.
And as mentioned in this Discord community I joined, we learned different tools, and one of them was Kyverno in its early days. And a bit later, I saw a stream from a Jim, maintainer of Kyverno, and Shooting, and they presented Kyverno and its new reporting mechanism, these policy reports. And I watched the stream, and I asked also the question, is there any way to use this report CRDs to get notified, get metrics, create alerts, something like this? But there was nothing at this time. You have the CRDs, you can watch them, you can search through them, but you have really or many information in a single report. It was hard to find a single failure and so on.
Okay.
And yeah, then I did just I thought maybe there could be something similar to the Falco Sidekick project for Kyverno. And I was just curious if I can implement something like this, and started with Policy Reporter. And in early days, it was just notification via Slack, and metrics was one of the first features, also the Loki implementation. So you make basically your policy reports visible. This was my goal at the first place.
Okay, but Falco and Falco Sidekick didn't use the policy report CRD. It was something very Kyverno specific at that time, right?
Yeah.
And
so Falco works totally different. Falco just pushes directly via HTTP or gRPC is results or alerts to Falco Sidekick or any other webhook.
okay.
But the policy report worked totally different. But
Okay.
I want to achieve something similar.
Okay, but what I was asking is, today Policy Reporter is not specific to Kyverno.
Yeah, that's true. This was more a side effect because the policy report CRD was supposed as an open standard. it was not a Kyverno specific CRD. And so the idea came to, when you already have a global available CRD, which might be used for many different engines in the future, you also can create a more generic tool, which is not tightly coupled to Kyverno, and use it for any engine which wants to use it together with policy reports.
By the way, I think I had the idea to invite you during the first episode because we talked about policy reporter with Flavio. If I'm correct, I think you can use policy reporter with Falco, with no, not with Falco, with KubeWarden.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes.
They recently added the policy report CRD as report mechanism with the audit scanner. And as long as you create policy reports, you can use my tool to visualize them.
So that can potentially require a change in the policy engine to support the policy report. But if they take the effort to support the policy report schema, they can benefit all the advantages from policy reporter for free.
Yes.
Okay, good to know.
Do you see any initiatives from other maintainers of other policy engines to use these generic CRDs and integrate with your tool? Are you aware of any efforts in this?
So at the beginning, I mostly talked to some maintainers to different tools like JS Policy and helped implementing the CRD. But nowadays, I see more initiative from the maintainers themselves. So one example would be the Trivy operator. It's not directly a policy engine, but kind of. They produce many different Trivy specific CRDs with their Trivy operator. And I created an kind of adapter which translate this Trivy specific CRDs to the common policy report. And now they have plans, as I remember correctly, to implement the policy report directly as possible output for their reports, and leverage basically policy reporter for their tooling as well, or as optional tooling.
Okay. And that means that you are adding sort of plugins to be able to integrate other tools, like what you did with Kyverno, right?
Yeah, the plugin. So a plugin is not required. It's just a way to enrich your informations with really engine specific information. So the basic functionality is completely can completely used only with using policy reports. But if you want to show, for example, in case of Kyverno, the plugin can provide the YAML of the actual policy, description, reader or more readable title, the min version of Kyverno, and some metadata. In case of Trivy, it can provide some details about the CVE, which versions are affected, which version fixed the issue, and but these completely optional informations, and you're not required. But if you want to have a better experience with policy reporter with your engine, then you can use a plugin to improve user experience.
Okay, great.
Okay. So yeah, I know there's a user interface too. You can potentially dig into the different violations using a simple website. Maybe this is a plugin, maybe not, I don't know. But I think at this point, do you have something like an architecture diagram or something you could present so that we can understand a bit more how the project works?
Yeah, I have a architecture diagram I can show. Should be visible now.
No, I will add it to stage. Okay. Now it's visible.
Okay. Yeah, so this is very basic, but it's should showcase how it works. So Policy Reporter has at least one required component, which is the core application. So this is the tool which basically watches for the policy report CRD, detect changes, and if it detects a new result in an existing policy report, it can create target pushes. So yeah, tools like Slack, Loki, Elasticsearch, Security Hub, and so on. It also converts the policy reports into metrics, so you can have an current state of your policy reports as metrics if you want to including it in your production observability stack. And it provides also an optional REST API. And this REST API is used for the second component, optional component, which is the policy reporter UI. So it has two internal components, the Go proxy backend, because we cannot access the REST API of the core app from the outside world, which is also not intended. We need to do internal requests in a proxy backend, which we can forward to the actual front end, which is a Nuxt.js based single page application. So Nuxt.js for backend people is a framework on top of Vue.js, which is quite popular these days, like React or Angular. And yeah, the third component is from the old version. It's the Kyverno plugin. As mentioned, nowadays it's a more open plugin system, which can be addressed different engines. But it's basically it has a kind of similar approach like the core app. It watches in case of Kyverno for the Kyverno cluster policy and policy CRD, and creates out of this information a REST API. And this REST API has a defined interface. So I basically say I support the list API with these kind of parameters, and it should return a list of your policies with a description, title, and so on. And then the UI checks if a plugin for a certain engine is available, and if so, it fetches the additional information and forwards it to the front end as well. And this is a basic architecture.
Okay, so the UI is a separate component.
Yes.
It's not required. It's not embedded in Policy Reporter itself. It's really somehow it's served by a separate binary, and then it relies on the Policy Reporter API, but it's not coupled with it.
Yeah, correct. And maybe worth mentioned, so the core app has an SQLite database, so it's basically fetching or watching over the policy report CRD and persisting it in different formats in a SQLite database. I did this step because the REST API would be very slow and very limited when we would fetch for each request the CRDs and filtering them on a code base level. Also over the time, more and more larger or clusters adopted Policy Reporter, and so it was just a performance decision to use an internal database to reform the policy report CRD and be able to do queries with different support of filter and pagination for performance reasons.
So here, you are like what you need to do here is to maybe cache these informations, right? That's why you are using this, or you need really to persist the data in.
SQLite is basically a persisted cache, so to say. So when you upgrade Policy Reporter, the SQLite database is removed like the core app itself. So it's no external database, it's really internal. And the SQLite database will be repopulated from the policy reports after restart. So it does not
basically
need
a cache.
Yeah.
And there's no way to use something else than SQLite, or?
Yes, you can also use MySQL, MariaDB, and Postgres. These three databases are supported right now. But in the current implementation, also external databases will be basically truncated when the pod dies and a new one came up, or if you have a high available setup and another pod is elected, it will also clean the database and repopulate them, because during the time a pod needs to be elected or needs to be restarted, something could happen with a policy report and the app would not know it and the database would be out of sync. So that's the reason why I repopulate the database to be really reflect the current state.
Okay, but in any case, there is support for an high availability setup with multiple replicas. Of course, you always have one leader at a time, but requests can be spread across different instances.
Yeah.
So there's
when you have the SQLite database, each instance will have its own SQLite database. They don't share it.
Okay, so there's no leader.
Yeah.
They are all they are all leaders, but
there is one leader, but the only responsible for the leader is the target pushes. Because if you have three pods and you have a new result, you don't want 3 notifications in Slack. You have one leader which sends the notifications, but all 3 can have the REST API and the request can be shared between them.
Okay, and in this schema, let's say I'm creating my own policy engine. I'm producing policy reports, so the policy reporter will see my reports. And can I create my own plugin, or does it does the plugin needs to live in the policy reporter repository?
No, it's also a standalone component. So maybe
so I can create one and sort of register it.
Yeah, I can. Let me showcase the plugin page. So this is the new monorepo style plugin repository. And as mentioned, I basically define a set of REST APIs. So it has to be v1 policies with this kind of response. And then you basically configure in your policy reporter UI your plugin over an HTTP address, which needs to be available within the cluster. It does not need to be an open or public reachable URL. And then it will use this REST APIs to get the details for your
Okay,
policies.
it has to offer a known set of endpoints, but as long as
Yes.
it adheres to those endpoints, the UI or the core application will be able to fetch data from it.
Yeah, and this system makes it really flexible also for the plugin maintainers. They can use any language they want. So they can use Go, they can use Node, Rust, whatever. As long as they provide a REST API with this defined endpoints and responses, they can use it.
Okay.
So, also my question here is, what is the requirements in terms of resources to run the policy reporter with its different components? And also, is there any operational complexity you add to your cluster when you run this additional components on it? Do you have any experiences or like feedbacks from users regarding these topics?
So it needs, I would say, yeah, only a few resources, so you can run it in any local kind cluster, Docker cluster, whatever. It's a bit depending on size of your cluster for sure, because based on the amount of reports and sources, it needs more memory to persist the metrics, and also the SQLite database needs some memory in this case. But there are rarely cases where it needs more than 2 GB of memory in really large clusters. In smaller clusters, I think it when it really needs not much resources. This was also or the intention or the initial idea of the UI was that it's an alternative to a completely monitoring stack. So in the first versions, as I mentioned, only metrics were available, where you need some kind of Prometheus, Grafana, and so on to visualize them. But a Grafana stack needs a lot of resources, also together with Prometheus to run in. And if you want to experiment with Carverno, for example, and you want to use Policy Reporter to just get an overview or a UI for your policies, then you need a lot of setup in your local test cluster to visualize them. And so the idea came up to provide this optional UI, which I don't know, need 50 MB memory or something. And have one Helm install command to get running and configured without much parameters. So you can just install the Carverno, the policy reporter with the enabled UI, and you directly get an overview without any additional monitoring stack. So resources and the amount of work to get something visible was the driver to implement the first UI version.
Okay. I think you prepared a small demo.
Yep.
I just want to ask one last question. Maybe Sarah, if you have one question too. But I see that we are already at 35 minutes. So after that, if Sarah has no question, maybe we can jump in the demo. But what, from your perspective and from the feedback you receive from users, what is the most useful feature of Policy Reporter today? What is the main reason why people deploy Policy Reporter and use it?
Yeah. So I think nowadays it's really the UI that you just get an deep insight into your cluster compliance, the result of your policies, As mentioned, it was a simple version of the Grafana stack at first. A bit later, and now with the completely new UI, it's way different to the Grafana dashboard. It has another organization. You have more possibilities to filter and organize your data. You can create selected or custom dashboards with a subset of namespaces you're interested in on a team level, for example. So you have much more capabilities. It got multi-tenant supports, so you can configure multiple clusters for a single UI. So you can basically just switch between your different clusters in a single dashboard. This I think is the most used feature. Other than that, also the notifications are still a useful feature for most people. I'm still adding new targets like Telegram and Google Chat and so on.
Is this usually is the typical user is someone from a security team, so someone from an infra team, or just developer teams?
I think it's really different. I know setups, for example, cloud cluster provider. They use Kyverno internally, and they want to give their customers in the different clusters an overview about their security.
Okay.
And they're providing basically different installations in the different clusters to give their customers an insight of their state. Mostly it's some kind of DevOps team, security teams.
And did you use it at work?
No, I don't think so. The funny thing is, I was never my own customer. I never used it in some way of production. It was just my hobby.
Okay, it wasn't your need in the first place.
Yeah, I just want to try it out to develop something, and if it's helpful to anyone.
Great. What are your plans for the future of the policy reporter? Is there any new features or like refactoring or things you want to add to this project?
As mentioned, I did a totally rewrite of the UI. I will also showcase or demo the new UI. Also the core app gets some upgrades, so there are many new exciting features. So authentication, as mentioned, the custom boards I will showcase, the completely reorganization of the dashboard. And I have no roadmap. I react on user feedback. If users request something which I think is a meaningful or valuable feature, I basically try to implement something.
Yeah.
But there's
maybe
no
maybe one last question, and then we can start maybe the demo. Are you getting support from the community? Who is maintaining and contributing to the project right now? Is it you alone on it, or people are contributing to?
So I would say I do around 90% of implementation. I sometimes get help from the community. There are also some features which were implemented from the community. So I get a lot of great feedback. They help me a lot with testing stuff because, as mentioned, I was never a production user. So I have no possibilities to try out if my tool works in a large production environment. But there were people which helped me out, which tested stuff. And so I got my feedback to know that it's really an improvement what I do.
Great. I think it's demo time.
Yeah. So, would you show us something concrete,
Yes,
practical?
I show you something. So I'm basically going through the new UI. As mentioned, it's totally different to the old one. And as also mentioned, it's not only related to Caverno. So in this setup, you see I implemented or I added to the cluster the Falco and Falco Sidekick tool, which has the policy report output.
Okay.
I have Caverno installed with the policy chart for port security standards, baseline restricted. And I also installed Trivia operator with my created policy report adapter. So I'm transferring the Trivia config audit and Trivia vulnerability reports into policy reports. And yeah, now we basically see an overall dashboard where you basically have a complete overview with all the different tools. So we can see which tools provides failures and past results. We can go to warnings. So we get an idea what's the current state of my cluster on an overall perspective. We can go on a namespace level to the different engines. So it would be hard to combine all engines in a single chart. So I decided to give some feedback per tool because different clusters can have a different amount of namespaces. We just see a kind of preview and we can extend to the complete list. And then comes the interesting part where we really see, okay, I have in the default namespace some service, some Nginx deployment, and I see, okay, I have 50 paths and 4 failures. And now I can see which engine basically provides these failures. When we go to the replica set, we see that this time it comes from the config, audit, and vulnerability tools. And yeah, as mentioned, we get a really overview about our clusters. And now we can decide if we want to go deeper in something. If so, we can go in a single resource, and then we have a list of our results in Caverno, and we really see the details. So this is what you saw on the first version. Now it's a bit more aggregated on a resource level, and then you can really deep dive if you're interested in.
And for example, you can show only the failures or the violations.
Yes.
In this case, most of them are green. So if you want to find only, okay. And you can probably sort them by severity, like if you want to fix the most critical ones first. Or
yeah, you can basically click on this. We have no only medium in this time, but you can basically also use these chips as kind of shortcut for the search.
Okay.
So when we click on fail, you only see the failed ones. Also, if you're more interested on a policy level, there are these policy dashboards, which basically moves from a per resource view on a per policy view. And then you can really go and see, okay, I have this rule, this low capabilities. And now I see, okay, the namespaces where I have failures. And here I have also a global status filter. You see I have these failures. I can go through the namespaces, got some details. Yeah.
Everything.
And these policy details are the informations from the Caverno plugin. So in a setup without the plugins, you won't see this information because it's not available in the policy report. But because we have a plugin which provides some details about our policy, we can show them as optional information. And we can also see the complete policy definition.
Okay.
Very interesting. I'm used to the old UI, so all this is new for me. It's very cool and exciting to see all this combined here. Great, great work.
Yeah, and as mentioned, also in this case, we have an overall dashboard, but we also have dashboards on a per engine level. And you see one difference to Kyverno, where you have a status chart. It's one of the newest features, because in case of a vulnerability, for example, you will never have a path result. Path vulnerability makes no sense. So you can basically configure on a per engine level if you want to see a severity chart, because this is what is relevant for me, which or how many critical results I have or high results. And also from the plugin, we get then some details on a severity level and see the resources which have issues with this severity.
And the Trivy configured it is not really related to a specific resource. It's just the config of the cluster, or
Sorry, can you repeat?
in the Trivy configured it dashboard, we don't see any pod or any underlying resource here.
This is the policy dashboard. We have also a resource dashboard for Trivy, and here you see the resource related. So because different companies need different views, some wants this kind of resource related. So you have this resource and you want to see, okay, how many issues have this single resource. But on the other hand, if you create a new Kyverno policy and you want to see how this single policy performs, you don't want to go through all resources and see, okay, this resource has this failure and another resource has this failure. You can just go to a policy dashboard and see how my single policy performs. Go into a single policy and you see the results from different resources related to a single policy.
Okay.
And yeah, maybe it's also interesting from a configuration perspective. Let me. What is it?
I think it's the first time the policy report with so many engines configured at the same time with Alco, and Trivy. So it's amazing.
Exactly, yeah. You have the whole overview concentrated in one single UI. It's amazing.
Okay, it doesn't show up in the. So I basically go directly in the repository instead. So what I want to show also. The new policy reporter version tries to reduce noise in policy reports. So one example I want to share is the new resource filter. This one especially. So one example would be Kyverno. Kyverno, or when you write a Kyverno policy against deployment or something, you basically write a policy for a pod, and Kyverno creates autogen rules to apply the same policy on the replica sets, the deployment, daemon set, cron job, and so on. But this means if you have a deployment, you will get results for the pod, for the replica set, and for the actual deployment. So it's kind of noise to have this replica set and pod information in the same UI as the actual deployment. And so I implemented a mechanism for uncontrolled only, which basically checks if you have a result of a pod, if this pod is controlled by a replica set, and if so, it will basically skip this result. And we can also completely exclude different kinds like a replica set, and this only for Calverno, which means in the actual dashboard, as you saw, we only have the deployment results and remove this noise of duplication.
And this happens at the core of Policy Reporter. It's not something specific to the UI.
Correctly. So it means it removes the noise from your metrics, from notifications, from any functionality. If you have a deployment, you will only be notified for deployment.
Okay, it's not just a visual workaround. It's in the at the heart of the system.
Yeah. But this was also one feedback I got, that you have just this kind of noise because it's basically duplicated information.
Okay. I think I will just let the audience know that if someone wants to ask a question, they can do it by posting a comment. Right now, we don't have questions, but I have some. So I will ask my questions. Sarah, if you have some questions, don't hesitate, because it doesn't seem like we have any other question anyway. So I think my first question is, do you keep an history in Policy Reporter? Is this possible, for example, to compare the current situation with the same situation 1 month ago and things like this?
No, not directly in Policy Reporter. This is something you could achieve basically with the notification feature, because you can use, for example, metrics. So metrics would be a way to compare the metrics from yesterday, which reflect the state of your cluster yesterday, with the metrics from today. There are targets like Loki, where you can see when when new results came into the cluster.
Okay.
Yeah, so no direct history in Policy Reporter, but you can use its notification and metrics feature to achieve this with additional tooling, I would say.
Okay, it's not in the UI, it's not in the core, but if the receiver, the destination that will make use of the metrics or the notifications can do that, then the system will be able to provide this comparison. Like 1 month ago, I had 3,000 violations. Today, I have only 2,000. So I'm better than 1 month ago and things like this.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that means that it is possible also to monitor the Policy Reporter components, right? And you have maybe Grafana dashboards for different components.
I can maybe I can real quick also showcase how the metrics look like. I find the correct browser for it. Yeah, basically the metrics of Policy Reporter are very flexible. You can basically configure what labels you want to have into the metrics. In a default mode, you really have all kind of information. So really the resource related to an failure, also the kinds and so on. So it's really detailed, which has the downside of really high cardinality. But the dashboards, the metrics are very flexible, and you can basically configure which labels you're interested in. And so you can create your own dashboards for a subset of resources. And yeah, so this would be the predefined dashboard. So you can enable a monitoring subchart within Policy Reporter, which interacts with the Prometheus operator. And here you can basically also check for single source. And then you see how your violations goes over a timeline, and also the list of results as we saw in the UI. So you're totally flexible in how you use these metrics to create your own dashboards, or use these filters to find the results you're interested in.
Okay.
Okay. So we still don't have any questions, so maybe I will pick one of mine. One thing that I was thinking about when you presented the UI, I wondered if you had some plans to add or to help with remediation at some point.
So it's no planned feature, because it's remediation. It's specific to an engine, maybe a bit hard to achieve. It's something which could be a solution for the plugin system. So like the exception endpoint. Maybe I did not showcase this one. So Kyverno offers this possibility of exceptions when you want to exclude a certain resource from a policy. And the plugin has an optional exception endpoint, like the list endpoint, where you can basically send some information about the resource, and then you get something back. In this case, it's YAML definition, which would be a policy exception for Kyverno. You can apply to your cluster, and then it would basically removed from the failed and passed results and would be skipped. Something like this could be for redemption, where the author of a plugin for any engine could provide a way to help the user with fixing some issues, but it's nothing on the current roadmap.
Okay, I was also thinking about, I don't know, fixing CVs. Sometimes tools provide some guidance.
Yeah, in case of a Trivi, for example, you might have details about the fixed version. So when we go into a vulnerability, here we have references to it.
Okay.
Sometimes they provide a fixed version, so you see which version you need to install. So version range, so you know which version is affected, and you might know which version you or which update you need to do to fix this version. So first patch, then you know you have to patch to this version.
Okay, and this comes from the plugin too.
Yes.
Okay, thanks. It looks a great tool and very helpful for users for improving the security posture and making the quality of the deployments better. So I think we are almost at the end of the live stream. So if you want to, I don't know, tell us what the policy reporter needs to continue growing. If you need, I don't know, more users, more contributors, more feedback, anything you want to get help with.
Yeah, so the most helpful in most cases are feedback. So from users with larger clusters, from users with small clusters, multi-tenant users, any feedback which could help me to improve the front end or the general user experience. As mentioned, I'm a backend developer, so front end is not my preference or what I'm most experienced with. But I do my best, and if any user has feedback to improve it further, I'm very open for it. Also, to get insights, what's maybe missing, what's valuable new features. So I already got some feedback for like permissions to only view a subset of boards, a subset of clusters if you have a multi-tenant setup, kind of stuff like this. Yeah, this is always helpful. I'm also very open for contributions. I have a normal some issues in the core repository. Also ideas for implementing stuff. So,
do you maintain a sort of roadmap visible in the repo? Or?
So I have, as mentioned, issues which are tagged with the V2 version for the UI and V3 version for the core component. It's not really a roadmap, but it shows my current work or what I'm currently working on. Okay. I don't have a real roadmap for the future. I'm reacting on user feedback as mentioned. So.
Okay. Sarah, anything to add?
Sorry. Yeah, nothing to add on my side. Thank you so much, Frank, for this great presentation, great work. Yeah, I think we exhausted all the questions, Shalida.
Yeah, I think too. So yeah, I want to say thank you too for joining us, Frank, and thank you for the awesome work, because you're a backend developer, but you're more than that, I think. You managed to create a complete product from scratch and to integrate with a lot of different tools. So really, it's an amazing job, especially for someone coming from PHP. I'm very impressed. I didn't know it was possible, really.
I'm still using PHP from time to time, so
yeah. Now, big congrats. It's a huge achievement, and yeah, thank you for taking the time to present that and to keep that project moving forward, and all the good work.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot. Thanks.
Great. Thank you so much, Frank. Yeah.
Okay, but thank you. This is the end of the episode. I hope to see you soon in another episode. We have nothing planned yet, but we'll let you know ASAP. So stay tuned, and we see you later as soon as possible.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you.